The Supreme Court really went off at the end of June. It's July now, and I'm late to covering all this stuff, but there's just a lot, and I wanted to kind of put it all in one place, so here we are. Welcome to YouTube. Let's go look at some of these articles that I have open about the Supreme Court. There were like 4 or 5 maybe different things that they did in the past couple weeks that were just wild, so I'm not going to get into depth on all of them. I want to acknowledge that they knocked down affirmative action, which a lot of people are really upset about. So Supreme Court guts affirmative action, effectively ending race-conscious admissions. They did not, however, overturn legacy admissions. So if your daddy went to Harvard, you get into Harvard. But if you're black and you're from an underserved community, there is no such thing as being promoted despite the fact that the school is already majority white. So like, that's the whole reason why affirmative action happened in the first place, TLDR, was that they just, like, places would not accept black people as employees or as applicants to college, and we needed to adjust that and say, hey, you should at least have this many people of the black culture getting into this school. And so now there's nothing to prevent that. It's gonna pretty much trend back to being an all-white institution because legacy admissions, again, many black applicants are first time in their family, like first generation college attendees, whereas with, white families that have historically had more wealth, et cetera, affirmative action has been ended. Supreme Court going off, popping off. The SCOTUS killed student debt relief. I know that apparently Biden has said that they're going to try to find some other way to do this, but the Supreme Court struck down Joe Biden's debt relief plan in a 6-3 decision, which rewrites federal law to create a bespoke extra-textual prohibition on the large-scale cancellation of student debt. That's not great. A lot of people are really upset. Hopefully they can maybe perform some other thing. Oh, legacy admissions. It means that my daddy went to this school, and that means that, like, my application is given greater weight. Like, I'm more likely to be considered as an applicant because my daddy went to this school. Yeah, it's pretty dumb. But anyway, so yeah, there was an attempt to cancel a bunch of debt for Pell Grant recipients. And like for the majority of people who have student debt, it's like less than $10,000 because they started going to school and then quit. The overwhelming majority of people who have student loan debt, like that would clear it for most people. And then you would still have plenty of folks who have like hundreds of thousands of debt from going to like become a fucking lawyer or a doctor or whatever. But no, they've canceled that. And Biden apparently has said that there is a different way for them to clear away student debt. We will see. The more relevant to me things about the Supreme Court, there's actually 2 other things that are a little bit more relevant to my channel. Hi, you're here for the trans and queer content. Nobody really cares when I post about labor or other things that are unrelated to being trans. Well, I should say, my core audience is mostly focused on the trans issue, which then makes it hard to branch out because YouTube, I swear to God, you do these stupid things all the time, making it to where if your video doesn't perform well with your core audience, then it won't get promoted in the algorithm, and making it hard for people to make different kinds of content. What if I want to become a lifestyle YouTuber, okay? I can't, because people care about my trans-specific content. That's what they subscribed for, and I can't break out anyway, I'm going to stop complaining about it. But anyway, U.S. Supreme Court won't weigh gender dysphoria status under disability law. So, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is the piece of paper that means like, yeah, you're required to have like accommodations for wheelchairs. You have to have a wheelchair accessible building. You have to allow someone with a service animal into your business. You cannot deny someone service for being disabled. Like there are specific protections for people with disabilities, right? And at some point after the ADA was passed, I believe, someone tacked on an additional bit in there that says specifically that gender identity is not a disability. There was a case asking whether gender dysphoria is a disability under federal law, and because there is legislation that specifically says that it does not qualify as a disability under the 1999 federal law, Americans with Disabilities Act. Like, so they were asking the question, does this count? Is it okay? Is it constitutional or whatever that gender dysphoria, it's an illness that you have to get a diagnosis for. I say illness, like it's a condition that you have to get a diagnosis for because that's how the system is currently set up. So it is a thing that is a disability. So yeah, despite the fact that you require a medical diagnosis in order to get a treatment, which then alleviates the symptoms, and despite the fact that dysphoria can be quite debilitating, can make it hard for you to do your job or do school, that apparently it doesn't qualify So the Supreme Court declined to hear a dispute about this. A trans woman whose former jailers housed her with men and delayed her hormone treatment asked whether gender dysphoria is a disability under federal law. So she's like, was I discriminated against under the ADA because I was denied my medical treatment? Like, I was denied my medicine, at least temporarily delayed. Like, she was, for a period of time, denied her medicine. So is that like medical mistreatment? Is that like disability discrimination? And they declined to hear it. So the answer is no. So for any future cases, you will not be able to have gender dysphoria considered like a disability. You know, it's explicitly not on the books. Even more relevant, and I could, I guess, go on a little bit further about this one, Supreme Court rules in favor of discrimination of same-sex couples. A woman who allegedly makes websites, an amateur website designer, so yeah, she was never even asked to make a website for a same-sex wedding. I'm pretty sure that this person created this company. Yeah, they will decline to hear this, but will rule on a case that was literally entirely fabricated. Yes, thank you, Timerinia. She had never made a single wedding website. It is against her First Amendment rights to be forced to create a website because for a gay wedding because of her religious beliefs, like that because it's like a creative endeavor or something. So despite the underlying claim being completely made up, the court sided with her religious liberty argument. The court ruled that a civil rights law in Colorado barring anti-queer discrimination violated the First Amendment speech rights. Doing so that has allowed businesses to discriminate. A new wave of litigation further expanding discrimination is likely to follow. Like previously, we remember it was the bakery, right? The bakery a while ago. Hit like on the video if you remember the bakery in Colorado where some person was asked to make, a man I think was asked to make a cake for a gay wedding. He declined. And it was found that that was not acceptable to do because it's like you're a business and you're discriminating. Was it 14th Amendment? I'm not sure if it was 14th Amendment, but I think the argument was basically like if you provide a public service, you cannot discriminate against people based on their LGBTQ status effectively. But now that's being considered like, oh, it's actually your First Amendment right. So you now have a First Amendment right to discriminate, like the speech amendment aspect to it, even though you're being commissioned. Is it my First Amendment right to decline to take work from a Christian? I'm like, I refuse to make you a cake because you're Christian. I refuse to put a cross on your cake because that's against my First Amendment rights. Like, no, of course that wouldn't work. Of course that wouldn't work. There's no way. The website thing was so bad that the guy they cited as having requested the website is a web designer himself and was straight married at the time they cite him requesting a website. It was just fake. Like, so like, I don't even understand. I don't understand how she got that case before a court because there were no damages. She alleged that someone requested this of her and that she declined. And then the person like sued her. Did they make up every aspect of it? Like the guy requested the website, didn't actually even need the website. Like literally every aspect of this was fake. So this is what the Supreme Court is right now. I wasn't sure what the point of this segment was when I started, but the point of this segment is that this Supreme Court is gonna screw us over as trans people. We keep wondering like, ooh, are they going to support trans rights? Like, you know, we've covered these cases where Trump-appointed judges are knocking down these care bans, trying to prevent trans kids from getting access to care. Like, it's so thoroughly clear that this is against the 14th Amendment, whatever. However, in Tennessee, there was a ruling, a Sixth Circuit Court upheld a trans care ban, citing the Dobbs abortion ruling, claiming that trans care is not, quote, deeply rooted in our nation's history and traditions and thus can be discriminated against. So, like, even if something is protected, even if something isn't explicitly illegal according to the Constitution, like literally just whether or not it was a thing when our country was founded, this thing is not deeply rooted in our nation's history and traditions, which also like abortion is deeply rooted in our nation's history and traditions. People who were pro-revolution described America as an abortion, like getting an abortion from the UK, and they described it that way and it was a positive thing if you look at the context. So that's just a lie. But anyway, so you can just say, oh, like this wasn't a thing back then and therefore it can be discriminated against. So, like, one of these cases is going to get appealed up to the Supreme Court. Like, let's just be totally clear. One of these cases is going to make it. One of these cases where trans care bans are going through. It is going to make it up to the Supreme Court, and they can just completely dodge the question of whether it is against the 14th Amendment by saying, well, it doesn't matter whether you're not getting equal protection in the sense that the medication is being dispensed to a different person for a different reason. It matters whether this is deeply rooted in our nation's history, and because it isn't, we've arbitrarily decided that this is a thing that does not deserve legal protection. So, like, I'm pretty sure we're fucked. Like, I'm pretty sure that we're gonna lose the right to healthcare on a national level for all trans people and not just trans children. I'm starting to really understand why leftists call them, like, priests. Because they really do, it's like truly arbitrary. And it's basically like when you have a government that is like closely entwined with the theocratic like system, the politician can say like, hey, you know, I'm trying to start a war with the neighboring country. Can you go ahead and like tell people that the gods smile on the omens of war? And then they do that. And then they get the religious excuse to do a thing. It's the same bullshit happening here. They just have these appointees. We've imbued them with this power. You know, it's not godly infused power. We've imbued this court with this power, and we appoint them, and then we go like, hey man, let me slip you a nice boat trip and maybe a fucking $1 million under the table, and you can rule in favor of my agenda, please. Oh, and to be clear, yeah, the affirmative action thing is related. The 14th Amendment was created during Reconstruction to address racial disparities, and the originalists just threw that out the window. So they cited the 14th Amendment about affirmative action. Yeah, like, this is not good. We're not in a good place. Having to have a conversation with your loved ones about needing to get the hell out of the country is not a fun thing to do. Or, like, at least getting to a sanctuary state. You know, if the national government goes down this transphobic route, which it probably will, then we need to like regroup in places that are safer, and like some of the places that are safer are going to be like states that have those protections. It'll probably take a little bit longer before the federal government says you're not allowed to make state laws that are you know, discrimination particular to your area. You're not allowed to make anti-discrimination ordinances in your state. You know, that it'll probably take a little longer. So let's concentrate in these places that are a little bit safer.
Hello, it's July. Thank you to my patrons, especially Tiago Nascimento, Mersh Rolvag, Amanda B., Michelle Frattaroli, Danielle McDonald, Sarah A., Spooky Heather Sylvia, Athiet, Robin Olson, Michelle Winter, Wellington Marcus, Jamie Jam, Past Null Infinity, Desi Quiche, Nova, Suzanne Maynard, Mr. Atheist, Elizabeth Bartell, Sojo, and Kevin Young.